What we know of art history today actually has its roots back to the 19th century, but what the study is about dates back to the ancient world. The art historians depend on the semiotics, formal analysis, iconography and psychoanalysis for understanding the history of a piece of art. After the World War II, when photographic imitation and printing techniques improved, reproduction of artworks became easier. Technologies as such have tremendously helped the study of art history to progress in profound ways, as they have facilitated easy evaluation of objects. Thus, the study of visual arts can be described as a practice that involves understanding social significance, context and form of art. The chronological pillar of the study is the commemorative history of beautiful creations commissioned by public or religious bodies or prosperous individuals in Western Europe. A renowned example is Canon, which remains prominent to this day, and even has its mention on the history textbooks. However, there has been an effort made since the 20th century to define the study to be more comprehensive of non-Western art. In the modern years, art history has come up as a study that focuses in educating people how to assess and construe works of art established on their own perception. Often, art history has been criticized for its biased nature because every individual has their own point of view of seeing and defining things. The study of art history teaches you to appraise what you see based on the art forms that you know already. This eventually develops your aesthetic understanding of a piece of art. Those interested in the study of art history are taught how to evaluate artifacts by numerous methods. It is difficult to understand the subject without knowing about the methods. Methods of studying art history. The art historians utilize several methods while researching the history of objects and studying the nature of the being of the art, its creation, existence and authenticity. They mostly examine any work of art in the perspective of the time when it was created. This is done in the best way, keeping in mind the respect of the creator's inspiration and constraints, along with contemplation of requests and predispositions of its patrons. A comparative study of the themes and tactics of the creator's teacher is also done considering the symbolism and iconography of the art. In short, it can be said that the world in which the art was created is deeply examined by the art historians. Art history includes the examining of the work through the study of the form, which is the use of shape, line, texture, composition and colour by the artist. This helps identifying if the creator has used a two-dimensional or three-dimensional picture plane of the architectural or cultural space to create the art. The manner in which these elements are used resulting in different kinds of art known as imitative or abstract art. When the artist creating an art in the imitation of another image or object, then the piece of work is called representational or imitative art. The art is known to be more realistic when the creator is able to create a perfect imitation. When the artist is not trying to make an imitation of an image or object, instead relies on symbolism to capture the essence of nature rather than directly copying it as it is called non-representational or abstract art. Abstraction and realism subsists on a continuum. For example, Impressionism is a representational form of art, but it is not directly imitative, but an attempt to create an impression of nature. If the work of art is not representational, instead is an expression of the creator's aspiration and feelings, or simply a quest for ideal beauty and form, it is known as non-representational work or an art of expressionism. An analysis of iconography is one in which the focus is kept on the particular design of the element. With a close examination of such elements, the art historians are able to trace their descent and come to a conclusion of the origin and root of the themes of a particular art. It is possible to make many observations in regards to the cultural, social, aesthetic and economic value which were responsible for the creation of the art. Art historians use the critical theory as a base to structure their investigation of the works. Theory is mostly used when the historians are dealing with more recent objects, like those from the late 19th century and onwards. If we talk about how the critical theory get its matter, well, it can be said that it is often the work of the literary scholars that they borrow to form the analytical base of the study of the artwork. The subject of critical theory is responsible in establishing theories such as Marxist, feminist, post-colonial and critical race. As in the study of literature, you will notice that the scholars take keen interest in the environment and nature, but what turn it will take on the critical study is yet to be determined. Pliny the Elder. The earliest writing on art to have survived to this date and can be categorized as art history are paragraphs from the book Natural History written by Pliny the Elder in AD 77 to 79. The writing was about the Greek painting and sculpture. It is from them that the idea of Xenocrates of Sicyon of BC 208 can be traced. Xenocrates was a Greek sculptor and writer and one of the world's first art historians. Pliny's work consists mainly of an encyclopedia based on science which has been influential after the age of Renaissance. In the meanwhile, developments occurred in China in the 6th century and many worthy artists were recognized by the scholar gentry. These writers were artists themselves, being essentially talented in calligraphy. There is a book written by Xi He, 6 Principles of Painting, which describes the artists of China. Vasari and Artists' Biographies. Giorgio Vasari was a Tuscan author, sculptor, architect and painter who wrote the first true history of art. The personal memoirs of the artists and their arts have been read by many from the Book of Lives of the Painters, written by Vasari. He highlighted the evolution and development of art, which created a milestone in the art history. The account that he has mentioned in the book about the painters has a both personal and historical touch to it. It features the biographies of Italian artists, many of whom were his personal acquaintances and colleagues. Michelangelo, also being described as the greatest artist of all time, also had a biography written by Vasari, which was very enlightening. Vasari influenced many, mainly by his unique ideas about art. He served as a model for several. His style and approach was highly persuasive until the 18th century, and that is when the criticism came along and raised at his biographical account of history. Art criticism. Johann Joachim Winckelmann, 1717 to 1768, was a scholar. He criticized Vasari's offbeat artistic personality and argued about the fact that emphasis should be made on the views of the learned men rather than the viewpoints of fascinating artists. That is how art criticism came to exist, through the writings of Winckelmann. Out of the many works he did, 2 of the most notable works that draw the conception of art criticism were Reflections of Painting and Sculpture of Greeks and History of Art in Antiquity, published in Greek in 1755. In the book, Winckelmann criticized the artistic immoderations of Rococo and Baroque forms of art and suggested more sober forms of art like neoclassicism. Jacob Burckhardt, 1818 to 1897, who was one of the founders of art history, he noticed that Winckelmann was the first person to have distinguished between the periods of ancient art and linked the history of art styles with the world's history. Until the mid of the 20th century, the area of art history was subjugated by the academics who were German. Therefore, it can be said that this work was the foundation of art history in the German culture. Johann Wolfgang Goethe and Friedrich Schiller, inspired by the works of Winckelmann, both commenced their own work on the history of art. The initiation of art as a major subject of theoretical speculation was made strong by works like A Critique of Judgment by Immanuel Kant in the year 1790. Furthermore, lectures on aesthetics by Hegel only made the foundation of art history stronger. One philosopher was inspired by another, and the art history made a strong base through the works of them. Karl Schnaase was highly inspired by the works of Hegel and was responsible in establishing the philosophical foundation of art history as an independent subject. He conducted one of the first historic surveys of the art history from the ancient times to the Renaissance. This immensely helped art history to be taught in the German-speaking universities. Stylistic study. Jacob Burckhardt, being one of the founders of art history, was mentor to many. Heinrich Wölfflin, 1864 to 1945, was one of them. Now, he is known as the father of the modern history. He taught in the universities of Basel, Munich, Zurich and Berlin. A number of pupils made a bright future for themselves in the career of art history. Wölfflin introduced the perspective of art history by giving it a scientific approach, concentrating on three concepts. His first concept was to study art with the use of psychology, especially with the help of Wilhelm Wundt. Wundt was the first person to have called himself a psychologist. One of the many things that Wölfflin argued about was that art and architecture are good if they resemble the human structure. The second concept was the idea of studying art through comparison. When an art is compared to another, it is easier to distinguish different styles. The book he wrote, Renaissance and Baroque, was based on this idea, and it was a first of its kind to show how one period style differed from the other. Unlike Giorgio Vasari, Wölfflin was not interested in biographies of artists. He had also proposed to create art history without any names. The third concept was of studying art based on the idea of nationhood. He showed an extra interest in finding out if there was particularly an Italian style and a German style. Vienna School. Coexistent with the career of Wölfflin, University of Vienna, a major school of art history, developed. Franz Wyckoff and Alois Riegel were the first batch students of the University of Vienna to have studied under Moritz Tausing, and both were bright students. Both were specialized to assess the neglected or criticized work of art. Both Riegel and Wyckoff wrote widely on the late antiquity of art, which seemed to be declining from the classical ideal before them. Revaluation of the Baroque was also a contribution from Riegel. The University of Vienna had a faculty including important people like Max Dvorak, Hans Tietze, Josef Strigowski and Julius von Schlosser. Many who studied in this university were important art historians of the 20th century, including Ernst Gombrich. The term Second Vienna School or New Vienna School refers to the institute opened by the passed-out students of the University of Vienna, including Hans Seldmayr, Guido Kaschnitz von Feinberg and Otto Pacht. They began the school in the 1930s. They intended to work on the concept of Riegel, even tried to develop the concept of Kunstvollen into a full-fledged methodology of art history. Seldmayr excluded the study of patronage, iconography and other methods used in the context of art history. Instead, he emphasized to concentrate on the aesthetic qualities of art. This resulted in a bad name for the Second Vienna School due to irresponsible and unrestricted formalism. Adding shade to it was the unconcealed racism of Seldmayr and his membership in the Nazi Party. Iconography. In the 1920s, a group of professors assembled in Hamburg. Erwin Panofsky, Fritz Sachse and Aby Warburg were the most prominent amongst them. The three of them established most of the vocabulary used by the art historians till today. The meaning of iconography is symbols from the text, which refers to the theme of art resulting from the written sources like folklore and scriptures. Iconology is a wider term which refers to symbolism in general. It is not text-specific. The art historians of today often interchangeably use these terms. Panofsky took to the theories of Riegel at the beginning of his career, but later got engrossed in iconography. He had a particular interest in the conduction of themes relating to the ancient classical history of Middle Ages and Renaissance. Panofsky was a professor in the University of Hamburg. His interests were shared with Warburg, who belonged to a wealthy family. Warburg's family had opened a remarkable library dedicated to the study of classical mythology of art and culture in Hamburg. Later, under the sponsorship of Saxe, this library was turned into a research institute associated with the University of Hamburg. After the death of Warburg in the year 1929, Saxe and Panofsky, who were both Jewish, were made to leave Hamburg. Both found new destinations for themselves. Panofsky found a place for himself in the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton. Saxe established himself in London, bringing along the library of Warburg, founding the Warburg Institute. Both of them were German-speaking men with extraordinary knowledge as art historians stepping into English-speaking universities in the 1930s who were still novices in the subject of art history. These scholars were the ones accountable for establishment of art history as an independent field of study in the English universities, adding to which the course of art history of America was determined, particularly due to Panofsky's methodology. Psychoanalysis. One of the scholars who appealed psychological theories to art history was Heinrich Wölfflin. However, he was not the only one to have thought in that direction. Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, wrote a book on the renowned artist Leonardo da Vinci. He used the artist's paintings to cross-examine his psyche and his sexual inclination. Freud concluded from the analysis he made by Leonardo that he was most probably a homosexual. It is contentious among the art historian to perform psychoanalysis on retrospective material, particularly because the sexual behavior were different in times of Leonardo's than of Freud's. Psychoanalysis is still endeavoured by scholars. Laurie Schneider Adams is one of the renowned psychoanalytic scholars who wrote a textbook by the name of Art Across Time and the book called The Art and Psychoanalysis. In the year 1914, when Sigmund Freud printed the psychoanalytical version of Michelangelo's Moses, the history of art criticism took an unpredictable turn, as it was the first ever psychoanalysis on a work of art. Freud had originally printed this anonymously for reasons unknown. Archetypes. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and the founder of analytical psychology. Like every other scholar, he was a unique and influential thinker as well. He had a different approach to psychology and emphasized on understanding the psyche through the exploration of the worlds of mythology, dream, art and religion. He concentrated most of the years of his life in Western and Eastern philosophy, sociology, astrology, alchemy, arts and literature. His most well-known contributions include works such as The Collective Unconscious, Theory of Synchronicity, and his concept of psychological archetype. Jung did not believe in coincidences. He suggested that indication of corresponding events is a mere reflection of our lifestyles. He debated on the point that archetypal imagery and collectible unconscious were perceived in art. The American abstract expressionist was particularly moved by his ideas in the 1940s and 1950s. His work was the core inspiration of the surrealist concept of drawing images from the dreams and unconsciousness. Jung stressed on the importance of harmony and balance in nature. He warned that the modern times human has become too dependent on science and would benefit from assimilating little spirituality and escalate their unconscious realms. Jung's work elicited the work of art historian, along with becoming an essential part of creating art too. Jackson Pollock, an American painter, created few artworks along with his sessions of psychoanalysis given by Dr. Joseph Henderson. Later, Pollock's drawings were published by Henderson to display the power of drawing as a therapy. The heritage of psychoanalytical art history is deeply rooted and carries on even after Jung and Freud. Griselda Pollock, the prominent feminist art historian, induces psychoanalysis in her readings of contemporary and modern art. Psychoanalysis has had a great impact on the men and women artists of the modern world. Ideology and Marx. In the 20th century, the art historians incorporated social history using the critical approaches of the art critics. The aim was to show how art can interact with the powerful assemblies of the society. One of the many critical approaches used by the art historians was the Marxism. The Marxist art history was a method of understanding the art as to how it was connected to the specific classes and how images contained knowledge of economy and how images can define status. The best recognized Marxist was Clement Greenberg. In the late 1930s, he wrote an essay on avant-garde and kitsch, describing how the consumer society is becoming the cause of declining aesthetic standards. Later in his career, he became well known for examining modern art properties. Meir Shapiro is another renowned Marxist art historian of the same period. Of all of his works about themes in art, he is best remembered for his remarks on the sculpture from the early Renaissance, in which he had seen evidence of the rise of capitalism and the decline of feudalism. The Social History of Art was a book written on the first Marxist study of Western art by Arnold Hauser. His attempts were to show the world how classy cognizance was reflected throughout the major art eras. When published in the 1950s, there were several controversies, as the book has bluntly generalized particular eras. The same strategy is now given a name: vulgar Marxism. Marxism art history was given a new definition by the scholars, namely O.K. Werkmeister, T.J. Clark, David Kunzel, Max Horkheimer and Theodore W. Adorno at the University of California, Los Angeles. T.J. Clark wrote Marxist art histories based on many realist and impressionist artists, including Edouard Manet and Gustave Courbet. These books dedicated to the economic and political conditions in which the art was produced. He was the first Marxist art historian to have written about abandoning vulgar Marxism. Feminist art history. Why have there been no great women artists? An essay written by Linda Nochlin provoked the feminist art history in the 1970s. It is the most widely read essay about the female artists. Followed by the 1972 College Art Association Board, with Nochlin as the chairperson, authorized eroticism and image of woman in 19th century art. In a decade's time, there was a wave of feminist movement, where high interaction of women in the art, both as a subject and artists, was observed. The essay written by Nochlin had a lot to say about the women being restricted from the field of art. Few exceptions who succeeded in proving their worth were treated as anomalies and were not given the chance at becoming successful. Another well-known feminist art historian figure was Griselda Pollock, who was a scholar of psychoanalysis theory. Feminist art history in the modern era gave women new opportunities to experience and understand art. There are many works produced by the feminist art history, critical rereadings of various arts, such as Les Demoiselles d'Avignon by Carol Duncan. Norma Broad and Mary Garrett were two pioneers of art history and were the founders of Feminist Art History Conference. Their works consisted of The Expanding Discourse, Feminism, Art and History, Questioning the Litany and Reclaiming Feminist Agency, Feminism, Art and History After Postmodernism. All these books are considerable effort made to bring the feminist perceptions of art history. Semiotics. Unlike iconography, which identifies the significance of art, semiotics is apprehensive about how the meaning is formed. Roland Barthes was a French literary theorist and philosopher. His implied and designating meanings are principal to this kind of examination. In a work of art, the interpretation of it depends on the identification of the meaning it denotes, that is, recognizing the visual sign, and the meaning that it connotes, that is, the cultural association that it instantly recognizes. A semiotic art historian's main concern is to understand the meaning-making of the art. Semiotic art history's work is to expose the codified meaning of an artistic object by examining its connection to a set of shared beliefs of the historians. Historians do not rely on a particular brand's semiotics, they instead create an incorporated version which they add to their analytical implementation. For instance, Meyer Shapiro referred to Chaucer's work on different meanings to understand to read the signs. He believed that, in order to understand the art in a particular symbolic perspective, it needs to be viewed in different aspects of the profile. Meyer Shapiro joined this method with Charles Sanders Peirce's work, whose sign, object and interpretant gave a base for his approach. Alex Potts demonstrated the application of Peirce's ideas to visual illustration by examining Mona Lisa in relation to them. When you look at the painting of Mona Lisa and try to identify a sign that the painting is trying to convey beyond its materiality, it eventually leads to the realization that the art is denoting an object outside of itself, Mona Lisa or a woman. There is no religious meaning which the picture denotes, therefore it can be called a portrait. This interpretation, in turn, leads to a series of other possible interpretations to questions like, how was Sitter related to Leonardo? What was her significance in Leonardo's life? Or maybe Leonardo portrayed her as an icon for the entire woman race. This series of questions that needs interpretation or unlimited semiosis has been never-ending. The job of an art historian is to limit the interpretation to as much as required to divulge new prospects. The study of semiotics works on the principle that an object of art can be implicit by the viewer's perception only. The creator of the art is replaced by the observer as the transmitter of its meaning to such an extent that an interpretation is valid by all means regardless of what the creator had intended to mean by the art. Rosalind Krauss adopted this notion in the essay that she wrote in the name of Picasso. She deplored the meaning in which the artist had created the work of art and asserted that the meaning of the art can be derived only once the art has been detached from its historical context. Another art historian by the name of Meek Paul debated on the same thing, that the meaning of the art does not exist until witnessed by the viewer. Feminism and psychoanalysis is only possible after acknowledging the meaning of the art. Museum studies. In the course of art history, aspects of new subjects have come to light in the modern times. In the recent decades, interests have grown towards the patronage of the arts. There are art markets and collectors who show intentions and ambitions in the trade of the arts. Museum studies have been a discipline of delight for those who want to pursue this dream extensively. There is a specialized field known as the history of collecting and display and history of the museum. New materialism. Science has made much progress over the years, and along with it has the techniques to investigate antique arts. The X-ray and infrared ray are now being used to study many underdrawings. Its photographic technology makes the paintings visible. Even a proper investigation of the pigments used in the paint is possible to identify, which in turn has upset many ascriptions. Radiocarbon dating and dendrochronology for panel painting, advanced techniques as such, have made dating of objects or to upset dates resulting from stylist study possible. Improvement of color photographs and the availability of them on the internet has literally transformed the study of various types of art. Most importantly, the arts which are large in number, such as the Persian miniatures and the illuminated manuscripts and other archaeological creations. Contemporaneous to all the technological progressions, art historians have shown growing interest in new speculative approaches to understand the nature of arts. New theories like the art network theory, object-oriented ontology and thing theory have been extensively useful in the historical literature. Divisions by period. Art has been bifurcated into specializations according to different eras and areas. It is done so for an easier identification. So the art historians can also choose their areas of interest and concentrate in specializing in them. For example, some may specialize in the 16th century Tuscan sculpture, while some would be more inclined towards specializing in 19th century German architecture. You will often find that subfields are included under one specialization, like the ancient Rome, Greece and Egypt, known to be special focus on the ancient art. Sometimes the subfields have a close association, while for a few there could be no strings attached. To summarize it all, art history is the study of the human countenance, keeping in mind the spatial, visual and tactical views of an art through history. In the long run, art historians have developed new ideas and methods to translate the visual to oral. This has been made possible by using numerous methodologies and different approaches of analysis and interpretation. The study of art history makes the historians extra sensitive towards understanding the deeper meaning of the art objects and the meaning it contributes to our societies. The methodologies were invented by the learned men of the 19th century. One inspired by the works of other evolved through the ages, the outcome of which is, today we have high-tech methods of understanding the nature of an art. Art seems to be interesting when it claims to have a symbolic value, understanding the symbols and interpreting attitude and the realities it reflects of the time when it was created is an adventurous journey for the art historians. Art history plays a major role in our lives. Through the interpretations of art by the art historians, we have been able to understand the lives of the humankind that existed centuries ago. Their recreations, interests, lifestyle, a lot can be interpreted by art. The interpretation of the political, economic and religious views of their times was mainly important as it was a foundation of the culture and society we live in today. Art history has immensely progressed from where it had started, and it continues to evolve by the day. The study of art history as an autonomous discipline was a very important step taken. The various contributions of the scholars and philosophers are tremendously helpful. They have spent years to describe, analyze or criticize pieces of art, and yet if you walk yourself to a museum full of artifacts, you will be amazed to find yourself involuntarily drowning in the mystery of the artifacts. Your mind will be full of questions regarding the story behind a particular piece of art, and that is when you refer to art history, because the historians have taken the pain on your behalf to find those answers for the world.